Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday, and welcome to another episode of They Say. My name is Allison McFarlane, founder of Allison McFarlane Inc., also known as AMI. And today I have the honor and the utmost pleasure of presenting you with someone that I have admired for many years, from being masterful at Bank of America to starting his own practice. I am so honored to have Dr. Jonathan with us. Dr. Jonathan, thank you for just being you.
Allison, thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be able to join your platform. And my appreciation for your greatness equals your admiration of the work we've done together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, Dr. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself. I feel like it's not fair. I know, so I've been honored to be in rooms with you. So tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I would say that my personal journey is the way I would tell my story has been one that is fortuitous and explorative. And so as I sit today, I'm very grateful and humbled to be in a position to operate and lead my own group private practice in the field of psychology as a psychotherapist. I am licensed to practice in 5 states now: California, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, and Nevada. And
Wow.
very soon next year, Texas is what I'm looking for. So that will be my final state. And in terms of who I am, I fit several intersections of identity. I'm
Mhm.
a student, a learner by trade. I am a father, a husband, a grandfather now, and a devoted member of the communities that I serve. I really enjoy doing the work that I do. I feel very fortunate.
That's so true. You really are those things. Because I love looking at your Instagram. I'm like, what's Dr. J up to now? What's he up to? Between the grandbaby and your wife, it's happy to see things that bring you joy.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So me and you kind of talked earlier, and I was like, what do we want to talk about? And I was like, there's so much turmoil and anxiety in our world today. And who better to help me unpack that than you? Between the political space, between things
Mhm.
happening on the job, between the world is just changing as we know it. And it seems like some of us are understanding the change, and some of us are just like going into a shell because we just don't get it. So how do you navigate these type of times?
Yeah, it's a great topic and focus for us to discuss today. First, how I navigate it is making sure that I stay systemic in my view. So, looking at things, zooming out first to allow myself to get a sense of what is really happening at a systemic level across, particularly our nation right now. We're
Right.
going through a lot of political discourse, discomfort, and intensity. And then zooming in with a mindful awareness of where do I have an opportunity to make a contribution.
Mhm.
I often quote to my patients and clients that Mr. Fred Rogers did a great job on me as a child on the Mr. Rogers, Mr. Neighbor, Miss His Neighborhood show, that when things get really hard, look to people who are the helpers and see how are they going about behaving and communicating, and how do
Mm,
you fit among them so that you're contributing to building while things feel like they're being deconstructed or destroyed for that matter. How are
mhm,
you healing when people are hurting? And how do
mhm.
you contribute value when things are being discounted in the human value in the system as a whole? So that's where I would give anyone a platform to start, conceptualizing what's happening in today's world.
Wow. So let's kind of unpack. How do we know people are helpers? Like, how do you identify a helper? That's a great way to start.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I love the question how, because how goes right to the point of what can be done, what could be demonstrative in the process of being a helper. So, how we know is where people land on their own behavioral interactions with one another, how they
Mhm,
go about communicating their emotional experiences, right? If
mhm,
emotional experiences are presented in a very confrontational way
mhm.
versus in a curious way
Mhm.
of, this is what's causing me discomfort. This is what's causing me a sense of awareness and activation. And how do I work together to either simplify the complexity that's in front of me or to be part of the solutions? That's how we identify the healers and the helpers. The
Okay.
other behavior out there is very mixed and hard to follow. So I
Right.
try to keep it to that, is understanding how do people show up as their authentic selves in the way that they're really contributing to some valuable meaning to others.
Yes. And in your perspective, because you are sitting at you have a grander view. Why are we so quick to label? I feel like we're in such a time
Mm,
now where everything you have a bad day, you're a narcissist. You look at
Hmm.
somebody and you don't want to deal with somebody, you have severe social anxiety. So why are we so quick to label?
Yeah, that's a troubling issue that I see in my field, in my profession. I'm glad you brought it up. To directly answer your question, the reason I think we find that people jump to these labelings saying, well, you're a narcissist or you're
Mhm,
gaslighting me or you
mhm,
have this disorder is because there's been so much stigma around mental health disorders.
mhm.
And, we don't go around and say, you have a broken leg because someone walks too fast or too slow. We don't stigmatize physical injuries or ailments or disorders, but we do that with mental health because it makes people feel unsafe to
Mm,
acknowledge that the human experience includes an emotional and mental component, that
yep.
the most important of 11 systems that the human body is made up of is the central nervous system is the command center of all of these other 10 systems. And
Hmm.
so it's just, I think it's indolent. I think it's short-sighted. And I
Yeah.
think it's born out of people's own fear of having to engage in a human experience. It's just easier to label people, whether that be in person, in real
Mhm.
life, or on a phone or a keyboard, is what I call those keyboard commandos that will zing
Yeah.
out things to people to label and cause divisive efforts to take force.
Hmm. I think that's great. And I want to kind of unpack something because you said that we're less quickly to label things. It almost sounds like you said we're less quickly to label things we can actually see. And if it goes
Mhm.
unseen, we automatically label it. And why do you think that the unseen is automatically labeled? Is it because we don't relate or we can't understand it?
I think it's a bit of both in some
Okay.
cases, right?
Hmm.
That we don't really educate the general population about mental health and mental
Yeah.
health illnesses or disorders.
Yeah.
So the first time many folks come in contact with a mental illness or disorder is when either they're diagnosed with one themselves or someone in their close proximity, their family or their community gets diagnosed and they go, oh my gosh, wow, that
Hmm.
now that explains what's going on. Case in point, one that's a little more severe, bipolar disorder, type one or
Hmm.
two.
Yeah.
That's a very disruptive disorder,
Yeah.
right? And going undiagnosed in many communities, particularly many communities that are of Black, Indigenous people of color, Hispanic, Asian,
Mhm.
that are less, connected to the mental health profession,
Right.
it becomes stigmatized as that
Right.
person's weird or they're crazy. So
Right.
it's just easy to go to something that seems a little more accessible of labeling versus being curious and understanding what is it about that person that causes them to behave in such a way.
Mm, that's powerful. And I was just about to go there about the different races
Mhm.
and how, especially I think us as African Americans, we tend to be very like shy or tell people to pray it through or go to church and it'll all
Mhm.
get better. But I
Mhm.
am of the belief system, Jonathan, that God made doctors, God made medicine.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
sometimes a prayer is to pray to find the right doctor to help you get the right
Mhm.
medicine. That is of
Mhm.
my belief system. So, how have you been able to kind of help, like, not warm the heart of our community, but help people understand that, yeah, prayer works, but we can do other things to help us get to that next step?
Yeah, that's a really important point, and I'm glad you bring it to light. So, what I'll start with first, I'm going to quote some things I think it's important to
Okay.
have reference and backdrop.
Okay.
When we look at the profession of licensed marriage and family therapists in the field of psychology, only about 7% of that professional population is Black, Indigenous people of color.
Yes.
And we make up about 13 to 14% of the population. So there's a disparity there.
Yep.
And then when you get down to gender, only about 1.8% of all therapists look like me, Black, Indigenous men of color.
Mm-hmm.
So we're far underrepresented in this professional pool.
Yeah.
So one, we need more representation. We need more people who look like us, who are in the profession, that when we make a phone call to start therapy and we have a consultation, that we feel like someone who's culturally sensitive, who can appreciate what it might feel like to live a life experience that is very Black in nature, not only by pigmentation but by experiential connections to different organizations and institutions. So that's
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the faith base, I think it's wonderful that we have a rich, you know, general connection amongst the Black community, that faith-based organizations play a role in our wellness. And
Mm-hmm.
that can be a side and adjunctive to therapy. We're not telling you to not speak to your pastor, your minister, or your reverend, or your rabbi or your imam, whatever faith that you practice, we encourage that in our profession, that your
Mhm.
spirituality is part of how you go about your healing journey.
Yep.
Yet there are clinical ways that we're able to help you that just won't be met by relying upon your spiritual faith-based organizations or leaders.
Mm. Let's touch that a little bit more because oftentimes I don't know if they're always equipped. And I feel like we kind of run into a scenario of, okay, do this. And if it doesn't work, then you leave a person in a space where you just don't know what could happen because they're not always
Mhm,
equipped. So I am of the notion that we should invite a licensed psychiatrist,
mhm,
psychologist, therapist
mhm,
to be part of the church. I think it's necessary.
mhm.
I
Yeah, I
definitely
agree.
agree.
I agree. I think there's a lot of work to be done on both sides, right? I do believe that there's more effort that needs to be put in place on the professional role of how do we engage spiritual organizations and how do we stay in contact with the spiritual community so that we help with the destigmatization of mental health care. And I do that myself. I reach out to my colleagues, my associates, and community leaders to talk about, okay, how does mental health provide additional advocacy for people to practice their faith in a way that's more healthy and sustainable. I think there's also an outreach that needs to happen from the spiritual community. And quite frankly, there are some religious leaders who stigmatize mental health because they're really ingrained in their spiritual writings that it's hard to detach from that practice and that habitual function of being spiritual only in nature without including the mental health component to the lives of their followers or their members of their congregations.
I think it's funny because my dad always tells me this. He's like, "You're so heavenly minded." Not me personally, but he just says in general about people. He's like, "You're so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good," and it resonates with me.
Mm,
It's funny, but it's true because we are spiritual beings, but we're also human having an
yes.
experience. So I think when we take out that experience, it makes us less likely to relate to others because we're all
Mhm.
mystical and stuff. And I'm just like, no, just you're just human. Like we're all going through stuff. Like just let the people know. So yeah, it humifies us.
Absolutely. Wise words by your father.
Yes, yes, he's a wise man. He makes me laugh every time he tells me that. So what really like let's unpack that 1% because you're like the second person I have spoken to that's an African American psychiatrist, psychologist, or licensed therapist who told
Mhm.
me that there's a very small percentage of African American men representing. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, there's a number of reasons for that. One is the field of psychology is a privileged profession. And when I say privilege, I mean that just to think about what it requires one to become a licensed professional. So I'll just give you kind of a short summary of what that means. Obviously, you have to have a post-secondary education, a bachelor's degree of some type, preferably a bachelor's in psychology if you can get that. And then after completing that, you've got to go on and earn a master's degree, which is another 2 to 3 years of getting that education. And then if you want to practice as a licensed marriage family therapist, which I currently do, although I have a doctorate, which is not in psychology, you have to complete in most states anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 hours of clinical practice under supervision.
Wow.
And that requires you to, in many cases, be economically constrained to how much
Mhm,
money you can earn. You
mhm,
have to live within the means of what you can do in terms of earning compensation while treating patients and clients under supervision. You have to go through certification trainings and continue education. And then when you finish that marathon, you have to sit for a state-based exam, either a national exam or state-based in the case of California, pass
mhm.
that exam to become licensed to practice independently or to practice under a group practice or an organization, nonprofit, or government.
Okay.
So there's a lot of time, a lot of money. The profession is not as sexy as maybe becoming a lawyer or becoming a business executive or an entrepreneur or some medical professional. So people kind of, raise their eyebrow like, do I really want to go through that effort and work to do that? And then
Mhm,
when you add in, if you want to become a psychologist, a licensed psychologist, which I am not, I'm a doctor of education and I'm a
mhm.
licensed marriage family therapist. A licensed psychologist has to do an additional maybe 5 to 7
Oh, wow.
years on top of the master's complete a doctoral program with a residency or clinical supervision for up to about 3,000 hours,
Hmm.
then pass the EPPP, which is a very, very difficult exam to pass, to
Hmm.
become a licensed psychologist. And so just do the math on the years, the money. And if your parents and your family have not stockpiled finances to pay for all your education, now you're talking about taking out grants or loans or whatever you can get to pay for your education. So that in most cases prohibits a lot of people from entering this profession.
Wow. So then I have a piggyback question on. I think now we're at a place where Black men's mental health is something they actually talk about.
Hmm.
Especially growing up, I grew up in a culture where my father is originally from Jamaica. So their
Hmm.
culture is very hard culture. Men don't express emotion, men don't do that.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
also kind of feel like that's a reason why a lot of Black men probably stray away from even going to a
Hmm.
psychiatrist or
Hmm.
therapist. But we're getting to a space now where starting to be more spaces where,
Hmm.
okay, man, let's heal. Let's heal together.
Hmm.
Let's heal separately. Let's heal collectively. What do you think has really caused the veil to come for, like, fall down and let us African American men and just men in general know it's okay to heal?
Wow. I am just, overwhelmed by that question because it hits home for me in so many ways for obvious reasons, but also more reasons that are obvious. Um, Part of it is that I think as Black men are
Hmm.
starting to recognize that we fit a very unique space in the demographics. First and foremost, Black men, with the exception of a smaller population demographic of Asian Islander, we have the lowest life expectancy of all other demographics. If you're a Black man and you live beyond 68, 69 years of age, you have like beat the statistics. And so when you factor in that there are many Black men that are not even living to their mid 60s, they're not
Yeah,
going to even collect Social Security, even if it's still available to them. They're
right.
not going to live the full life that maybe their constituents or counterparts in other races, ethnicities, and gender of women will live.
Yeah.
So that's one factor. And I think the other piece of it is that when I did my dissertation study on Black men and examining financial capability, financial literacy, under the lens of institutional racism,
Mm,
Black men are faced with very systemic institutionalized barriers that create this sense of marginalization that's internal. And you factor in that within our society, we deal within the Black community and Black population the generational trauma that comes from having to endure
yeah.
very severe conditions that Black men face in a very unique and different way than Black women do. Black women have progressively done much better
Yeah.
and pursuing post-secondary education, becoming a lot more willing and more safeguarded in seeing medical and mental health providers. And I see that in my practice.
Oh
I
yeah.
see more Black women that are my patients and clients who are even bringing their husbands with them or
Mhm.
bringing their sons to the experience. And so I think now Black men are having more advocacy and awareness because the information is more readily available. And in some of their families, their loved ones are saying, "Hey, we want you to live a full life. We want you to sit on the front porch with the rocking chair and watch the grandkids grow up a
Yeah.
little bit and have the opportunity to live a life with us in the way that you deserve."
That's powerful. So I didn't know, I should have known because you're such a student of life that your dissertation would have been on some type of financial literacy.
Hmm.
'Cause you're such a student of life, and then not just a student of life, but a student of just wealth and how do we create that. So let's talk about the mental space of creating that generational wealth that you speak of and that
Hmm.
wealth. How do you have to prepare for that? How do you have to be sound mentally?
Well, it starts with first recognizing that you have to create safety for your own sense of self,
Mm,
right? So sense of self from the body of psychology is defined as having a self-esteem that is healthy and seeing your own characteristics and how you're satisfied with yourself, a self-image, your conceptualization of how you see yourself amongst the population, amongst the world, and then your ideal self. What do you aspire to embody? What are the behaviors and
mm,
characteristics that you want to aspire? And that in itself gives us an opportunity to start thinking about, do we have license by our own sense of self to go about life in a way that we can create wealth? that we can create and accumulate generational wealth. And that's not only in the financial piece, right? Because
Hmm.
the truth is, we have this notion that wealth is about having the currency of finances to spend and buy things of value and assets that appreciate over time. But
Yeah.
the true currency of life is time, and the
Yes.
true assets of life is health. So,
Hmm.
starting with making sure that we're healthy beings, that we're not being susceptible to things that cause us harm, then that opens up the portfolio, right? For us to start thinking about, like I have.
Yeah.
What are the professions? What are the businesses that we can start? How
Yeah.
can we do that within our own communities, with our own
Yes.
families? And doing that in a way that we're not just getting caught up in what happens to a lot of our Black, Indigenous men of color who are amazing athletes and actors and entertainers, is that it's all about the fame and the glitz and people paying attention to you. And then that is short lived, right? That has a short curve on it. It's
Yep.
more about the things that of how do you create a broader spanning capability to move your family and your generation forward in a way that is progressive and long term. That is the way, and that's the pathway that I have found that has worked for me and has worked for other Black men that I get the opportunity to call my close friends or family members.
That's powerful. And I'm glad you mentioned that space because a lot of people are like, oh, especially young African American youth, you think you want to be LeBron James. You think you want to be Michael Jordan. I don't even know if he's still popular, but if you want to be Michael Jordan, that's
Mhm.
what you're trained and conditioned to want to be. But not everybody makes it. Not
Mhm.
everybody, there's a very slim picking. And I now being at the seat that I'm in, it's even slimmer than what I thought.
Mhm.
And then now with this NIL money and all these different things, it's so
Mhm.
much pressure to just continue to accumulate. And our kids spend so much time training, but I don't know if they're training them like getting the training they need mentally. I feel like they're getting the physical training. Like they can run miles, they can hop, jump, skip over everything. But the mental endurance that life needs, that
Mhm.
you need to have to be able to mentally endure life, that's where I see such a big opportunity.
You're right. And it's inspiring to see so many young Black men who are emerging adults between the ages of 18 and 30,
Hmm.
who are student athletes,
Yep.
who are getting the NIL money, who are playing, collegiate sports and earning their education, being innovative, right?
Yes.
I'm so excited when I see these young Black men and young Black boys growing into these really powerful contributors to the universities and institutions that they're at. And so I champion that and I want to applaud them and I want to encourage that while also temper it with, let's not get lost in this idea that you become a product.
Yes.
Because when you become a product because of the intersection of your race, your gender, and your talents and capabilities, that makes it easier for people to colonize you,
Hmm.
right? To colonize your thoughts, to
Hmm.
colonize the way you live versus having a life, having more of a lifestyle, and
Yeah.
to create these images that are projected back to you to tell you how to define yourself.
Hmm.
So, what I would offer to any young Black boy, man, emerging adult that's listening to this conversation that we're having is to slow down, right?
Yes.
Slow down and practice mindfulness. And mindfulness, in its true definition, is to have awareness and acceptance in each moment as it unfolds without judgment of self, as if your
Mm.
life depended upon it. So there was a saying that my mother used to say to me when I was younger. She would say, honey, count your money slow and act like you know, right?
Mm.
Slow
Oh, she's
down,
a rapper.
right? Be careful how you move, right? Because what someone can offer you that seems very appealing in a financial package or a presentation of power or access to certain rooms and certain people could have a short lifetime of benefit, which creates that dopamine spike in your brain. And when we're acting on our impulses, our instincts, and our reflexes, we're not using the most important part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex,
Hmm.
right? And furthermore, and I'll make this point, then I'll pause. Furthermore, depending upon who you ask,
Hmm.
as neuropsychologists,
Yes.
the brain doesn't fully develop until anywhere from 25 to 30.
Hmm.
But yet we send our kids off to college at 17, 18. They
Hmm.
graduate at 2021 and we go, take on the world.
Mm-mm.
You got a college degree, you got to figure it out. No, they're still developing their brains. They're still figuring these things out. So
Yes.
slowing down allows you to go farther than trying to go fast for the sake of the flash.
Yeah. Oh, so much to unpack there. And that was so, oh, you just got me so excited because I do think I think I would say like my parents' generation and the generations prior, I know a lot of people say my generation and the newer generations, we coddle our children and they're not,
Mm,
they feel like the
hmm
children are not, they can't go to the future because they need a lot of support from their parents. But I think what a lot of us realize is when we heard once you're 18, that was like it. And you
mm,
didn't know what that
mm,
looked like, how to navigate that. And you didn't have, because like now, I know my parents didn't always tell me their stories. So,
hmm
so because I didn't always hear their stories, I made sure I like went to older people and had a lot of older people around me so I could watch their
hmm
story and get things that I didn't get at home because my parents were not just really in a position where they were comfortable sharing their story.
hmm
So
hmm
I come from the notion, and you tell me what you think. I come from the notion that like my daughter's like, well, mom, what does it take for you to just tell me I have to leave the house? I said, girl, nothing. You stay here as long as not to make her a baby
hmm
or anything, but
Right,
you stay here
right.
as long as you need the support to be able to advance and go further in the world. And
hmm
that's my notion. Now I do want her to eventually get out the home and not be at home forever.
hmm
But
hmm
I appreciate the fact that I'm in a space where I could be like, okay, if you need this additional help, like you still got a village at 18, you still got a village at 20,
Yes,
you still got a
yes,
village at 35, you still got a village at 40. I feel like the notion of not needing a village is so it's just a negative notion because
yes.
no man is an island. So you need that village to really help you navigate this thing called life so you don't lose it.
Yeah, I love that. Compliments to you as a mother and as a representation of what's possible, right? You're
Yeah.
building for your daughter the ability to cultivate an understanding that everything starts with safety.
Yes.
And it's mixed, right? Because there was times I can remember a younger version of myself thinking, "Oh, I can't wait to turn 18 so I could
Yeah.
go live on campus and be on my own and have my own place in privacy." And yeah, we get that. As an emerging adult, you're really striving to have more independence and to connect in a way that allows you to have freedom to make decisions without some intervention or oversight by your parents. So what I try to do with all of my patients and clients, particularly when I work with families, because that's a
Mhm.
tough one, like you just
Yeah.
described, I
Yeah.
help parents understand that when your children turn 18, yes, they are legal adults, but they're not fully developed human beings yet.
Hmm.
And yes, you do have love and stake in their lives in a way that you want to help them continue to grow. So that's the time for you to cross the bridge from being parent to advisor.
Hmm.
Right. An advisor doesn't mean you have to kick them out of your house. Advisor doesn't mean you have to shut them off or cut them off from access. But advisor means that creating space for them to grow at their own developmental strides. Right. And that's what you're doing for your daughter, Allison. You're doing an amazing job of doing that because there are some families that believe that's the right thing to do
Hmm.
because culturally, there's this sense that, well, you're grown now, so go out there and be a grown person.
Yeah. No.
But without the education and the experiences, it's very, very difficult to make that transition.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes. It is very difficult, and I think it makes me sad too because and this is a sensitive subject, but I definitely I
Mhm,
want to have
mhm,
you address since you're on.
mhm,
It makes me sad because I often feel like we push the children. Some of us are so good at
mhm,
pushing our children so much we push them right out the house, and then they can't deal with life, and then they might kill themselves or something really traumatic
mhm,
happens.
mhm,
And I know me personally, we have experienced that in our own family, and
mhm.
that is something that can change the trajectory of everyone's life because you don't think, well, maybe I shouldn't have pushed as hard. Maybe I should have pushed a little
Mhm.
less. So just navigating those spaces.
Well, yeah, you bring up important topics throughout our conversation, and this is one that needs to be touched on,
Yeah.
that death by suicide, as we call it. And there's times in the past we would say committed suicide, but we've learned that committing means that it's almost criminal. And we don't
Hmm.
want to criminalize somebody who's suffering to the point that they decide that they take their life from themselves.
Right.
So death by suicide is a real risk and hazard.
Yes.
And when we think through the fact that we now live in a postmodern society that is very different than it was 30, 40 years ago. 34 years ago, an 18-year-old could arguably walk out of their parents' home and go get a job in an industrial manufacturing function or a trade and start
Hmm.
earning an income, have enough money saved up to get an apartment, maybe even start the process of thinking about purchasing some kind of property,
Yep.
and still have their village, though,
Yep.
supporting them
Yep.
and there to advise and there to offer resources as needed. That was a lot more attainable and accessible 30, 40 years ago.
Hmm.
Now we live in a world where the disparities are much deeper and the complexity of life is far more mystifying. And
Yeah.
so the taxing on the central nervous system and the mental conditions that can start to creep up, and two of the most prevalent disorders that are diagnosed, which is anxiety, which is 20% of adults at some point in their lifetime will likely be diagnosed with experiencing an anxiety disorder, and roughly 10% of adults will be diagnosed with experiencing depression, and sometimes both. Sometimes they come as two different faces of the coin. And the persistency of depression and anxiety among people of color is higher by population percentage
Hmm.
because you've got economic, social constraints or pressures that really make it hard just to live, just to exist. So, without recognition of that,
Yeah.
we set ourselves up for greater risk when we push people and we push our young people faster than they're ready to make that move into gaining some level of independence and interdependence in our communities.
That's powerful. And as a, some call it a type A personality, but but as a type A personality, especially let's speak to this perspective. The woman in corporate. I don't think
Mhm,
people, especially Black women in corporate and just women in
mhm,
corporate in general, I think that's a topic that some speak on, but some truly don't understand because the amount of pressure just in that space alone
mhm,
could drive you to drink a few drinks if you don't get
mhm,
the type of help you need. And I feel like now, post George Floyd, a lot of
mhm,
those helps that we have been pulled back just
mhm.
because of the climate we're in. So how do you still navigate these spaces when you felt that you had the support, but then all of a sudden the support goes away?
Wow, this is a good one. So, and
Especially
I'd say that
you're going to need
even
more than an hour.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So even though I have made my own departure from corporate
Yeah,
work life and experienced the last several years, I still have good ties and connection to the people that work in that space and that
yeah,
professional, lifestyle. And it is troubling. You're right. Since the George Floyd unfortunate murdering and taking of his life in a way that was visible to all of us to see
yeah,
and without any doubts. And the outpouring, right? First, there was a great outpouring and a great convergence of support and
yep,
advocacy
yep.
and financial dollars earmarked in programs around diversity, equity, and inclusion to really provide more opportunities for Black, Indigenous people of color who recognizably had been oppressed and marginalized in many of these spaces in professional work life and in community places. And
Hmm.
so there was like this awakening, if you will, this
Yeah,
inflection point of like, okay, we got to do something different. We got to do something better. And that was really inspiring. Yet I had some cautionary pause for that. And here's
yes.
why. A lot of my work and my research was informed by the late and great Derek Bell,
Okay,
who was the first Black Harvard professor, first Black lead of the Harvard Law Review,
okay.
and was a professor of the former President Barack Obama.
Oh, wow.
And he is known as the father of critical race theory. And in
Mm,
his tenets of critical race theory, one of them is interest convergence. And
mm,
what he really proposed is that, and we look at history over time, even the civil rights movement, the Reconstruction period, whenever there was a time in which Black, Indigenous people of color were given some opportunity to advance and become more equitable amongst their white brothers and sisters in community, as he describes it, as Dr. King describes it, that happened because it converged at the interests of also those who had power,
mhm,
right? It wasn't this altruistic outpouring of we're going to do this because it's the right thing to do it alone.
mhm, mhm.
We're going to do it because it also serves purposes.
Yep.
So knowing that, I think that what we have to recognize is don't become so reliant upon what other major programs are going to do for you. Make sure that you're taking steps to navigate your organizations and the people that you connect with so that you're building ground up, you're building grassroots because those macro programs sound great, but it take a long time for them to filter down into something that's meaningful.
Yeah.
And so I like to call it sometimes instead of what they used to call affirmative action, I like to call it performative action on the parts of those who have power.
Mm, wow. Wow. That's powerful in itself. Because you're right. So I think this kind of goes back into, and I think I know it also goes back to building your brand because I feel like I don't know if masterful is your word, but in my mind,
Mhm.
that is your word. Like no one can be
Mhm.
masterful if it does not come from you. So, how did you understand the importance, even before brand building, the importance of it?
Well, part of it, I think, was acknowledging that I understood that people need to have a way to safely and comfortably remember what you stand for
Mm,
in order for them to really identify with you.
okay.
And you don't do it just for that purpose. You do it so that you show up authentically. So, yes, I've used the word mastery and masterful because that's something that I live. That's something that I've lived for most of my life. That if you're going to do something worthwhile, why not go as far as mastery so that it becomes a part of how you go about experiencing life, being phenomenological, right? That your lived
Mhm.
experiences creates more opportunity and space for you to be able to do the things that are important to you. And so having a brand that people know how to find you as well, right? I can tell you right now that, day to day I get phone calls or emails or faxes through my fax machine of saying, Dr. Jonathan, we want to work with you because everywhere we looked on Psychology Today, on LinkedIn, on your social media, the people we've talked to who know you, it's consistent that you really are all about that business of helping people heal and enhance their wellness, that you live that. I mean, you really, this is not something that you're trying to do, it's who you are. So,
Mhm.
my brand of mastery is around being authentic, being core to who I am so that it operates like the truth. The
Yep.
lie has to keep protecting and defending itself.
Mhm.
The truth just shows up.
Amen. If I had some money to tide, I would die. Because yeah, that is because you know why that is so true. Because I think we get we get so caught up in the executive presence and
Yes.
titles and the labels and all these great things. But then, do you have the characters to sustain those things? This is why I was like,
Mhm.
in my mind, you'd already been on my podcast and we had a great conversation.
Yes.
You're,
Yes.
you're like, Allison, that is not happening. And I was like, what? That's crazy because I agree with your clients when they say from you teaching us how to master balance sheets and P&Ls,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
teach people how to master their mental and emotional well-being. I agree 1,000% that the mastery of it had the tools might have changed, but the vehicle
Hmm.
is still the same, which is you. So I think that's awesome, and I can definitely say keep them busy.
Well, yeah, and I'll just and for sake of just follow up on that
Yeah,
is this understanding that how you go about doing that is not transactional. It's
right.
not to master something so that, oh, this is going to get me this,
Mm-hmm.
right? That this always this need to trade off. It's about being transformative. It's about
Mm-hmm.
understanding that how do I keep enhancing upon what I've been given as a life? I am so grateful. I am so blessed to live in this moment right now with you,
Yeah.
having this conversation that this moment matters that much to me, that it's an affirmation to me that there's a greater being that has blessed me with giving me life and
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. How would I take that at discount? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a premium package. That's
Yeah.
a premium package.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use all the features, bells, and whistles of this life
Yeah.
because God has given it to me. It's a blessing. So, some choose to say, I'm gonna take the discount path and just kind of go about life as it unfolds and fumbles around. Yet I choose, and anyone can choose for themselves to say, no, no, I'm going to invest. And that's case in point why I show up the way I'm able to show up because I live it consistently.
That's powerful. That is so powerful and so needed at this time. So, Dr. Jonathan, what are you working on now? How do we stay in touch with you? Where can we find you? Please come to Texas, like go on a
Yes,
speaking tour, like tell us more. Are you writing a book?
yes, yes. I love Texas. I haven't been here. It's been too long. Um, I am working on a couple of different things that are
Okay.
really important. I'm glad to share that. So first, as I have my own corporation, and within my corporation, I have two arms of business operation. One being my psychotherapy practice, Enhanced Mindful Therapy. As you see, I'm sitting right now in my office in Westlake Village, California, and nice and tucked in, a great place where a lot of my patients come to see me in person, in which I provide them psychedelic ketamine assisted psychotherapy, somatic therapy, and mindfulness based therapy, working with families and couples and individuals. So that is probably a large share of what I do in my business. The other
Mhm,
part of it is my organization, MindSoft, which
mhm.
is focused on expanding education, not only for other psychotherapists that
Right.
are in the field, but also professionals, working professionals, and bringing their voices to the surface, right? Bringing in friends like I brought in your voice. I had the
Yes.
privilege of interviewing my podcast, and that was wonderful for me to have you speak about branding and development of brand recognition. So that's another function. And then also now teaching at Pepperdine University and the psychology program. So I love working with students. You know, I love being in a
Yes.
classroom. You know, I
Oh, yeah.
love teaching and learning with others. So I'm pretty busy with that. And then the big share of my time, obviously, outside of doing these wonderful things, is to spend time with my family. I love my family, my siblings, my wife, my children, granddaughter. You know, just having a chance to be with family is always rewarding. So I am licensed, like I said, in California, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, and Hawaii. And Texas is next year. Texas is a tough one, but I'm not going to let the barriers get in the way. I will be licensed in Texas next year this time.
I believe it, and we need you. So
Yeah.
please hurry.
Yes,
Hurry.
yes.
We need.
And expanding my practice multi-state. That I forgot to mention
Okay.
that. That's the end game, is to have offices that patients and clients can come in person in each of those respective states. And the interim, they can see me through telehealth individually and some of my associates that I'll be bringing on board in the next several months.
That is awesome. And man, I just want to thank you for your time, your influence. I want to thank you for teaching us to be present. I think we get so busy with life that we forget to
Yes.
actually live life instead of just getting to that next task. So thank you for talking about, you talked about being present without even really telling us, hey, be present. So
Mm.
I appreciate that, because I often feel like if you are busy in this world going on in that little spinning wheel, you forget to be present and the importance of being present.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you for your time, your influence, your resources, your knowledge, and the things that you've poured back into me, and just everyone that you've been a blessing to. And I just am so excited for your practice to continue to grow, your podcast. I just can't wait to see you on your national book tour.
Yeah, that'll be years to come.
Okay.
It's plenty to
Okay.
do now. So I would just say that to you, Allison, thank you for what you've done for others in this platform that you've created. It's incredibly hard work. Most people see you do this and they think it's easy because you make it look easy, because you're talented, you're
Yes.
incredibly intelligent, you have a heart that really gives. That's just how you're designed by God.
Mhm.
And I'm just very blessed to have the connection and friendship with you. So thank you for
Okay.
allowing me to join your platform.
It was a no brainer. Okay. So, how do we find you?
All right. So you can find me online at emindtherapy.org. That is my website for my practice. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. And all my profiles are public. So you get to see the real deal. There is no curtains. You see me chasing the granddaughter, or me making
Yep.
fun of my wife, or my wife making fun of me, or my family members having a good time. I am going to show up as I am. This is the only life I get to live. So reach out to me through my website or through email. They're all out there. My business phone number, you can contact me. If you know someone who needs help, they're suffering from anxiety, depression, or trauma, or couples trying to restore their relationship, and I've got the availability to help them, send them my way. I accept some insurances. I have a lot of patients that don't have insurance who do cash pay, but I'm more than happy and delighted to provide care to those in need.
And we thank you. And this has been another powerful episode of They Say. So I'm just honored, and I thank you again. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we
Thank
will see
you.
you guys next week for another phenomenal guest. We're just going to keep this train rolling. Bye.